What is the fastest you have ever seen a new coworker get fired? Guy got hired and was filling out paperwork in the lobby on his first day. Before he could finish the paperwork, the hiring manager came out and told him the offer had been rescinded. Turns out a current employee noticed the new guy in the lobby and told the hiring manager, "If he stays, I'm going to quit. That guy slept with my wife about a month ago." Story time. Sometime around 2003, I was on a business trip, and at the hotel the night before preparing for the client presentation. 7 of us, that included me, and a new sales director named Paul. We're projecting the slide deck onto the wall using Paul's laptop. Paul has to take another call, so he leaves and we continue. Someone wants to add a slide with some of our company's background, so we open up a browser window to go to our company's site, and, of course, porn opens up. The lady driving the laptop frantically tries to close the window, but it just spawns 2 or 3 new windows with new porn. She tried to stay ahead of it for like 10 seconds before just unplugging the laptop from the projector. Dead silence for a few seconds. After the shock wears off, one of the women, 60-ish-year-old lady, stammers, "I've never seen anything like that my entire life. I'm the only guy in the room at the time and I'm getting strong men are pigs vibes from everyone else, so I don't say anything and try to look as small as possible." Later, Paul rejoins his not knowing what had transpired. The most senior person in the room, a VP, asks everyone to step out and give her a minute to speak with Paul. We come back like 30 minutes later. Paul is understandably paler than he was earlier. No one mentions the porn and we continue with prep and presentation the following day, using someone else's laptop for the actual client meeting. The following week, each of us are asked to HR to provide our summary. Paul sends out an apologies email saying his 14-year-old son must have gotten on his CPU. Anyway, Paul resigned before the end of the week, and that was less than a month after he started. Sorry, Paul. The porn really wasn't that bad, but you can't do that shit on a work laptop. Brand new VP of HR was hired and was introduced to the staff in the morning meeting. He got up in front of everybody and said, "To break the ice, I think I'll tell a little joke." And then he proceeds to tell a racist joke with Asians as the butt of it. New VP of HR. Needless to say, everybody's jaw hit the floor and there was dead silence in the room. Instead of picking up on the fact that he said something that horrified everybody, he says, "I guess you didn't get it, let me tell it again." Before he got 2 sentences into the joke, another VP got up and put his arm around him and walked him out of the room. The guy was immediately fired and never seen again. He was always thereafter jokingly referred to as Ring Colin. I worked at a high-security workspace for a while. Under no circumstance could you take photographs anywhere inside the building, and you were strongly discouraged to post on social media where you worked, something to do with the competition finding things out. So this guy took a picture of his employee pass on his first day and posted it on his Facebook talking about how happy he was with his new job. Work found out. I think his FB wasn't even set on private. He was gone quite quickly after that. I worked at an arcade restaurant for a few years. I picked up a Sunday morning front desk shift, and someone lost their brand new iPhone in the arcade. I put it in the drawer because when she called, she said she'd be back in a couple hours to get it. I informed my manager of all of this. My shift ends. The second shift desk employee comes in and has a second-day trainee. Nothing unusual there. The manager I told about the phone walks out with me, and there are 2 different managers in charge now. I get a phone call around 8 p.m. from a manager I'm pretty good friends with, we'll call him K, asking me what the F I did with the woman's phone. I tell him, and offer to go up there and search the security footage for when it may have gone missing. He agrees and I go back to work. So watching the footage from when I put the phone in the drawer to when the woman finally arrived, about 7 hours after our phone call, takes a while. Apparently the other manager on duty had decided to cut the employee at the desk and allow a second-day trainee to work on her own, using a cash drawer signed out to somebody else, and a swipe card that wasn't even hers. All around chaos on that one. Kay is off doing manager things, and I'm sitting in the office watching the footage with a couple kitchen guys who are bored since it was a slow night. Finally, we see the trainee pick up a receipt, very carefully from the drawer, and slide it into her bag. Kay comes up and watches the footage, and asks if I'm available to close the front desk that night depending on what goes down when he talks to her. I say yes because hey, I'm already there and money is money. The girl apparently says that she thought it had been there long enough for it to be considered free game. We would donate items that were left longer than 3 months, but not anything expensive. That always gets returned somehow, otherwise it's left in the safe. She got walked off property by K and never came back. She was cried up a storm after being told that unless she returned the phone that night, the woman was pressing charges. When she brought back, she acted pissed off, as if it was somehow all of our fault. New guy drove a forklift into a fire hydrant, in front of a safety rep for the company. His supervisor was called over, and he immediately tells the supervisor that he won't pass a piss test, as he used his only bottle of clean piss earlier that day when he hired in. Everybody standing there immediately burst into true laughter, which continued as security, also laughing, escorted him off-site. Even the supervisor was all smiles, just gave him a pat on the back and wished him the best of luck. It was wild. During their onboarding training, they stole my boss's wallet on camera. 1 hour in. Worked at a steel processing plant, polishing, cut to length, etc. Everyone started off as temps, some for years, before getting hired in. Management decided they were short-staffed, and the solution was to start hiring people full-time off the street. So this dude starts full-time on day 1. Full benefits, more money. Gaining trained by temps who'd been there for months, if not years. Everyone is mad resentful of this dude. Obviously. Halfway through his second day he gets escorted out for testing positive for coke on his drug test. Coke stays in your system for like 2 to 3 days. They didn't hire any more dudes full-time off the street. I work construction. We had 2 new hires that were friends starting the same day. Boss told one take a coffee order and come back. Took everyone's money and said he needed his friend to go with him cause it was a big order. They never came back. This was a while ago at my old job. New guy gets hired as a busboy. He was super annoying and tried to insert himself into everyone's conversation, whether they wanted him there or not. It only took a couple of hours for the whole restaurant to hate him. I was working the bar and he kept eating the bar fruit. I personally didn't care, but the manager did. Manager comes over and tells him to stop eating the fruit. He looks the manager in the eye and eats another piece of fruit. Manager says really, followed by come with me to the office. New guy promptly replies with all right man. Calm down. I can tell you got that big dick energy for a good reason, followed with cliche wink and nudge from his elbow. In front of me and like 4 other employees. I wanted to slam my face into the ice bin. It was so cringy to witness. He promptly walked out the front door 10 minutes later without his uniform on anymore. The worst thing about it was the manager was an insanely laid-back guy. Hell, the whole restaurant was insanely laid back. You really had to try hard to get fired from this place. Had he not thrown in that big dick line, I'm almost positive he would have just gotten a slap on the wrist and kept the job. A 19-year-old kid got hired to work the seafood counter. See him twice and then never again. Asked a coworker what happened. He had closed seafood one night and was walking out of the store, and the 5 pounds of crab legs he'd stuffed down the back of his pants fell out in front of the closing manager. I owned a construction business and we recently hired 3 new employees due to expansion. I didn't get to meet them yet as my business partner was the one who interviewed them and watched them get started on the first day and would check in on them most mornings. Along with the new hired, we promoted one of our best workers to manager to oversee them. So after a few days I noticed that we were behind schedule on the job. This wasn't all that surprising because we had the new hires, but I decided it's best to go in and check it out to make sure everything was going well. So I call up my manager and tell him to go to a different site. We did multiple sites each day, and that I will take over at the place with the new guys. I arrive at the site half an hour late due to traffic and everyone is already hard at work, and in fact they're working efficiently and correctly on everything. I asked them a few questions about what they're doing, and so on, and get all the right answers. I figured the delay was just the first 2 days of learning, and am very pleased that everything was picked up and seemed to go well. Now it is important that at this point, I didn't actually introduce myself, and nobody asked who I was, so it seems everyone just assumed that I was just another worker from the company they never met before. So 2 hours before we are supposed to finish for the day, a guy comes over and says, "Hey, just so you know, we're all gonna head out now, but clocking that we worked the whole day, manager allows it, and the owners never notice." So that is the story of how I fired 3 new hires on the first day I met them. and also how I had to fire our best worker. Day 1 of training. Within the 6th hour of an 8-hour shift, worked an old crank handle service elevator at a private residential condominium for very, very, very wealthy people. We told him just shut up and stare straight ahead. Don't speak unless spoken to. 'Cause old rich people are mean and don't care about you. Well, what's the new guy do? Starts a conversation right away and asks the resident, how much money do you make? Edit. To be more clear, it was a 1920s skyscraper in downtown. 4 or so hours. When I was 18, I got a job at a grocery store, along with 3 others. We all started training together. On the first day we were training in the evening, and one girl asked to go home. She said her head hurt. They said fine. She clocked out, went to grab a grocery cart and started filling it with beer and liquor. The store manager walked over and asked her if she was having a party. She said yes. Didn't even try to come up with an excuse. Just, yeah, I am. So I needed to leave early on my first day. Basically, he fired her. My sister was fired on day 1. My dad had his own small medical practice and would hire me and my sisters as our first job to be his receptionist and file insurance claims, so we could get some workplace experience before we went job hunting in the larger world. My older sister worked for him in high school for a year. I worked for him for 2 years. Then it came time for my younger sister to take over. I brought her to work to start training and said the number 1 rule in the office was, at work he's not dad. He's the doctor and the boss. She sassed him in front of a patient her first day, with all the venom and sarcasm a teenage girl can muster when dealing with a parent asking her to do something. He fired her on the spot and I had to drag her out of there. Mom told her at least she'd get paid for the couple of hours she managed to be employed. 1.5 hours into shift as an animal care worker, I was showing my trainee how to clean the kitten rooms and started him on the easiest cage. We're talking neonatal, 6-day-old bottle feeder kittens. I explained how to set up the kennel, clean them up, etc. I turned around to grab some towels and a fresh hot water bottle when I heard a thump. And then another thump. Turned around, and he was tossing the kittens to the other side of the kennel to move them. Like, underhand lobbing a softball. Just tossed 3 kittens out of his way. I freaked out and yanked his ass down to the supervisor's office. His excuse was the kittens were attacking him, and he felt threatened. So he threw them. No warnings, fired on the spot. The kittens all were fine and got adopted out a few months later. I was fired on my second day as a line cook at a Metzel's restaurant in Washington State back in the 90s. Turns out I was hired just to threaten the job security of a long-time line cook with an attitude problem, to keep him in line. He got the message and apologized to the manager, and I was fired for breaking a yolk when flipping fried eggs one time. I'd been a line cook for a few years by then and thought I was doing pretty good. I was taken out the back door and terminated on day 2. Happened in Oak Harbor back in mid-1990s, so yes, I did find another job since then. I was pissed, but got over it quickly. Cooking for a living was hard work, standing in a hot kitchen for 10 hours at a time, going home splattered with grease, getting yelled at by waitstaff and management. I don't do it anymore. We got a new contract for 2 receptionists to sit at our front desk. The company did not send their sharpest knives in the drawer because it was a low-dollar contract for only 1 year. You could consider the positions temporary. They sent a guy that my security manager called Sticks. He was incredibly malnourished and thin. We had a front door that was double-door paned glass. I always exited through the side door and would look in through the glass doors every day when I left for home. On Sticks's second day, I looked in through the glass at the dark reception area and saw one of the office chairs behind the reception counter as it slowly spinned. I entered back in through the side door and came into the back of reception. I found Sticks laying on the floor with an ergonomic office chair that had fallen on top of him. His head was bleeding from where he struck the floor or some other object. Also, in my peripheral vision, I saw a can of compressed air, the type for cleaning keyboards. Sticks said he was perfectly fine. I helped him up and sent him home. Over the next few days, other admin folks reported to me that they kept finding Sticks collapsed in the reception area when no one had been around. I finally called his corporate supervisor to come take him away. When the supervisor arrived, Sticks had locked himself in the supply closet and refused to talk to me. I could hear him huffing air behind the door. The supervisor talked to him through the door and finally escorted him back to company headquarters. They fired him. I called the company, and I learned that Styx was a former service member who had served in combat. Looking at his resume, I knew he was also a former EOD team member. I suspected he had substance abuse problems stemming from PTSD and head trauma. I still had his contact information, so I contacted him a week later. From then on, I coached him every day until I finally got him an appointment with a volunteer from AMVETS who got him and his family help and care. Today, I wish I knew where he was. This was more than 5 years ago. I hope that he took advantage of the help offered to him. Because of this thread, I'm going to text him right now and see how he is doing. Edit. Texted him. He didn't remember me at first because it was 6 years ago. Told me that because of me, he went and got help from the veteran volunteers. I ended up in Richmond, got my problems figured out, and I am infinitely better now. Thanks again. As a teenager, I worked at a bowling alley. Within an hour, a new girl was fired on the spot for dropping a ball on the foot of a complaining patron. 2 hours into their first shift, I was managing the front end of a local grocery store at the time. Guy around 40 is hired on. From the moment I meet him, I could tell he was a real winner. Pair him up with a trainer to learn register and go back to doing the morning bookkeeping. Go to check on them about an hour and a half later, and I see him pocket a 20 from the register when the trainer's back was turned. I went to the store office, pull up the security footage, show the store manager. We called him to the office, get the 20 back from him and fire him on the spot. He made the local paper a week later after he got busted for cooking meth while in Walmart. Not someone else but me. Many moons ago, when I was a kid, I got a job at Walmart. The position was called stockman, so I assumed, incorrectly, that I would be stocking shelves. On my first day, during my first 5 minutes, my boss handed me a normal-sized broom. My response was, "On what shelf does this go?" He told me to go sweep the entire parking lot, roughly the size of a football field. I laughed heartily into his confused face. "Oh, did I mention it was raining?" So again, he tells me to go sweep the parking lot, and not to come back until it was complete. I just kept laughing and said, "Fuck that." I was fired by about my 10th minute, which is still too long to work for that place. Coworker's first day at McDonald's. While walking through the kitchen, the manager handed him his uniform. He stopped dead in his tracks in the middle of the kitchen and stripped down to his underwear to change into the uniform. First the shirt, then the pants. He was fired by the manager, who had handed him a uniform before he stepped out of his pants. It was the only time I've seen someone fired publicly. All of the crew members and anyone waiting in line to order food saw this happen within about 90 seconds. We hire through a temp agency with little background checks. I pretty much got a guy fired within 3 days. I am the only female on the shop floor, and at the time the youngest team member by around 15-20 years. At the time I was 19 and this guy who was 40 had just started. I instantly got a bad feeling when he just would not stop staring at me. Several coworkers mentioned it to me, as well as asking personal questions within 10 minutes of meeting me. Anyway, I could not get over this creepy vibe no matter what, and it did not help that the guy kept screaming about conspiracy theories. Did you know there's apparently an ice wall surrounding the flat earth, and there are special guards with lasers that will shoot on sight? Anyway, I had mentioned it to both my manager and my coworkers, that he absolutely terrified me with the vibes he was giving off. They agreed to keep an eye on me. We are a small team in a very old, large building with a lot of hiding spaces, and we are expected to do a lot of our work on an individual basis. By the second day, the guy waited till we were alone and started saying, "You're not like other girls. You're so nice and perfect and you would make an amazing wife," in a very creepy tone. Cut to a few hours later, the guy is shouting about how his current girlfriend is useless and a bitch and how much he hates her to the rest of the team on break. By the third day, the guy starts screaming about his conspiracy theories again on break, but starts acting aggressive towards those who question him. After break, another supervisor asks why I'm laughing and I quote what the guy said. Long story short, the guy lasted another 3 hours before he was told he would not be coming back the next day. Turns out the guy had also gone into the main offices and tried to convert people towards his branch of religion and would not stop the subject when asked by several staff members. I worked at a swimming pool store in college. Part of the job was to bring the chemicals, filter, sand, pools, salt, etc. out to the customer's vehicle. The sandbags were like 50 pounds, 22.6 kg. The salt bags were like 40 pounds, 18.1 kg. We needed another set of hands to help out around the store. There were some not so physical aspects to the job, but our preference was to have someone who can handle both the retail duties and the warehouse duties. So my boss let the recruiter know that we had a preference for anyone, male or female obviously, who could handle a little heavy lifting. They found us a match and ensured that she could handle all the responsibilities that we wanted. The next day, the new worker who walks through the door is about 5 feet 5 inches, 165 cm, and 110 pounds, maybe 115 soaking wet. And she was wearing fuzzy slippers. We work in a warehouse of heavy objects. I'm not one to judge off appearances alone, but I was skeptical. Either way, I showed her around the warehouse. When a customer comes in to get some salt for their pool, I put her to the test and asked if she could load up 2 bags and bring it out to the car. After 3 minutes of what should have been 30-second work, I walked out into the warehouse, and she was struggling to even get the bag off the ground. She was gone 30 minutes later after a total of an hour and a half of work. And my boss told us she was the one who said that the heavy lifting was no problem.